Good morning on this Sunday, August 9th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. During the coronavirus pandemic, students returned to school in Georgia, either virtually or in person, and there's controversy to go around. She may co-own the Atlanta Dream, but WNBA players are wearing their pick for U.S. Senate, and it's not Kelly Loeffler. Georgia voters head to the polls for runoffs, and polls show Fulton County's long-term DA may be in trouble. Darren, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy are all here joining us from their homes. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
It's a return to schools for students and teachers unlike any other year. And already some students and teachers are in quarantine after coronavirus cases popped up at their schools. Cherokee County just began its school year on Monday, and already several different schools in the county have coronavirus-related quarantines in place. Gwinnett County Public Schools announced this week students will start the year with virtual learning and be given the option to return to school in person by the end of the month. Several teachers say administrators have to put safety above all else.
You cannot recover from the grave. You can't. And that's the bottom line for me.
Teachers went back about a week and a half ago to prepare for the start of the school year, and the district says more than 250 employees have tested positive or are quarantining due to possible exposure. Phil, I'd like to start with you this week. I don't think we're surprised we've seen COVID cases in these schools, and we're hoping they're just nothing serious. I've said this on the show before, you're just not going to please everyone, no matter the decision these administrators make.
Well, that's a good point, Laura. You can't please everybody, and everybody predicted there would be problems naturally for school reopening. I've always been a big advocate of trying to get as many students as possible, K through 12, in-person learning, and the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, has excellent guidelines on how to do that. But naturally, there's going to be glitches. And for example, we saw some video of students in crowded hallways that obviously they weren't going one way or the other, and they weren't spacing them out. Some schools said they had to redo their bell systems for when the classes start and finish. I think it's important, though, that we have parental choice, whether you're doing virtual or online learning or whether you're in school. And so, again, the American Pediatric Association says it is very important, as much as possible, following safety procedures, to get the kids in class, learning with their teachers and mingling with their friends through social distancing if possible.
Kathy, let's expand on this a little bit. You know, I'm a parent of 2 school-aged children, and so far they're going back to school this week in person, but they're also required to wear masks, and I'm completely fine with that. My youngest is 9 and he is adjusted. So what do you think about this argument that there are frontline workers who've been back on the job for months? There are also, you know, waiters and waitresses and cashiers and folks really in retail that have been back on the job. So why shouldn't teachers have to go back? What do you think about that argument?
I don't know. I can't follow the logic of people not wearing masks anyway, because we know that that's the probably single most effective way to prevent what's going on. But, you know, Lori, we just found out this week that a 7-year-old in Chatham County died from complications of COVID-19, and that child apparently had no pre-existing conditions. We're seeing outbreaks as soon as schools start back again, and then they're having to stop again. And I think the disruption of starting in person and then having to close down, regroup, and send kids home again, doesn't bode well, and we're heading into flu season. So I don't know how we keep a lid on this with schools open and kids in person.
Theron, I want to turn to you because we did see some pictures from schools. It was Paulding County schools. Phil had mentioned these, but what about this issue? Why not require these kids to wear masks? Do you think that this should come from the governor? I know he doesn't want a statewide mask mandate, but aren't schools a little bit different? I mean, these kids are inside the classrooms, they're in the hallways.
Absolutely. If the governor won't make it a mandate for students and teachers and faculty and staff members to wear masks, I think this is an opportunity for the superintendent of schools and local school boards, mayors, county officials. They need to all come together to require that we wear masks. Now, to be fair to the Paulding County School, that we did see that picture that was very frightening to a lot of us. They did say that there were other hallways that were not as crowded. It's just that that photo was taken in a very congested hallway. But be that as it may, Lori, I think that it's absolutely unacceptable for people not to wear masks, period. But particularly, we got to make sure that the students, the faculty, the staff, and the teachers are protected. And the best way to do that, as Kathy just mentioned, is to not only wear masks, but let's make sure that when the students and the faculty and the staff and teachers leave the school, that they're conducting themselves in a very, very good way to make sure that they're social distancing so they don't affect others when they come back to the school.
Right, and I mean, I kind of thought that was a weak argument because all it takes is one student in that one crowded hallway. If you're saying they're not all crowded, all it takes is one student to spread that virus. So Janelle, I want to ask you, what do you think about the teachers who are calling this basically a death sentence? I mean, what do you think about the points that they make, especially the ones who have underlying conditions?
Well, so I'm not a parent, but I will say that I can imagine this is a very difficult decision because there's so much uncertainty. And for teachers, I think that they are entitled to have their own opinions and be able to make these decisions. But I want to say that I also think that this is a good time to discuss school choice. And the reason why I say that is because when parents have an option of whether to send their kids back to the public school that's open or to another public school that's choosing to open or to a private school or charter school, I think it relieves the pressure off of teachers, off of faculty members in general, as well as off of the parents. I know the president stated that he would consider providing additional funding for PPE to certain schools that wish to open, and then to parents who's in school districts where their schools are not opening, the funding so they can send their schools to either private or charter schools. So I just think that overall, having school choice right now would be very, very helpful, and it relieves some of the pressure.
Phil, I want to switch gears because Governor Brian Kemp surprised a lot of folks this week, hinting at a special session. Do you have any insight on this and the reasons behind it?
I don't, Lori. I'm adjusting my phone here, but I will say this: when the governor is hinting for a special session, it's not just to fix some technical glitch in a bill that could be fixed in January. I think all of us on the panel have been watching the General Assembly over the years now, and I think that's going to be some tweaking to the $29 billion plus budget. You know, we discussed on the gang in June that when the budget was passed by the legislature, those numbers would have to be adjusted in August. And guess what? It's August, and I think they're going to have to look at adjusting some of these numbers and maybe looking at some budget cuts. So it's going to be interesting, especially the...
All right, we seem to have lost Phil, and we apologize for some of these technical issues. It's just kind of where we are with trying to do these remote shows. But Theron, I'll turn to you. The governor also said it doesn't look like state agencies will have to brace for budget cuts next year, and that's a little bit of good news.
Yeah, that's really good news. And to echo on what Phil was saying is that none of us really know when the governor is going to set this special session, the dates for the special session. I will remind our viewers that a lot of these state legislators, and not all of them, are in basically contested races. And so when you come back to a special session, you're not able to raise money. And a lot of these members would like to be in their hometowns and their districts trying to campaign for re-election. And I think the other thing that's very important in what Phil just said is that we knew that there were going to have to be some tweaks to the budget. But I would tell you that we need to stay tuned because there's always a lot of posturing and maneuvering and negotiations going on leading up to a special session. So we're really anxious to see what the governor is going to say that will be the priority. And let's also note that the speaker and lieutenant governor sent out a letter this week saying that they don't necessarily agree with the special session, but if they have to come back, they will.
Everyone's reading between the lines on this one. Thanks, everybody. Well, coming up, the WNBA weighs in on Georgia's U.S. Senate race, wearing their pick on their shirts. We'll discuss after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
After Senator Kelly Loeffler criticized the WNBA for supporting Black Lives Matter, the league is voicing their support for one of her opponents wearing Vote Warnock shirts. Kathy, this really is a bold move considering she's co-owner of the Atlanta Dream. What are your thoughts?
Well, clearly the players don't care about that because they're making their opinion heard quite strongly. And I think, the repercussions of Loeffler's sort of more moderate stances as owner previously to now as candidate, where she's going hard to the right, have left many of the players, or if not all of the players, feeling extremely betrayed. And they're speaking out and showing it by their endorsement of Reverend Warnock.
Janelle, as honorary chairwoman of her campaign, of Kelly Loeffler's campaign, I know you have something to say about this.
Yeah, I think it's funny that Kathy referred to it as being extreme to the right, to just have an opinion that opposes the masses. But I will say that I think, if anything, Matt Lieberman should be upset because he's actually beating Raphael Warnock in the polls, and they completely ignore him. The left completely ignores him over and over again. But at the end of the day, this is what it proves. It proves that Senator Loeffler was right to stand her ground and to stand up for what she believes. She refuses to be bullied. This organization has a my way or the highway mentality that basically says that anyone who doesn't support what they support, then they're going to cancel you out, or they're going to endorse your opponent, which they probably was going to do anyway. So at the end of the day, I just think it just really shows that she was right. And I do know that Stacey Abrams is on the board, and that I wouldn't be surprised if she has some type of input in this as well. So, it's all about politics. We can pretend that this is about police brutality and everything else that everyone wants to say it's about. But when the bottom line, when it comes to the end of the road, it's about politics. And I think that's what this is showing.
Phil, I want to bring in Congressman Doug Collins on this issue. He's, of course, another candidate in this race. And we got a release this morning from Martha Zoller, who's executive director of one of the PACs, $5 million for the Loeffler campaign, and really saying that Doug Collins' campaign is a fraud. What do you think about that?
Well, certainly the rhetoric has stepped up in the special election between Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler, and of course Raphael Warnock, and what about 18 other candidates that'll be on the November ballot. We've all predicted there'll be a ton of money pouring in. You're seeing that right now. I think that if I was advising the Loeffler campaign, and I'm not involved in any senatorial campaigns, but I would stick to just still reintroducing yourself rather than attacking Doug Collins and calling him names. Both sides have to remember in the Republican camps that there's probably going to be a runoff mathematically in January 2021, since it's a crowded special election, and each side is going to have to depend on those voters. So really, the Loeffler people can't really afford to tick off the Collins people, and vice versa. So I think it's a very tricky balancing act. I think that, for example, a recent ad that's saying that Doug Collins was representing slime balls as an attorney was wrong, because those were appointed cases by a judge, and you get this on all sides. I don't care what party you're talking about. You get a lot of rhetoric and distortions, and I think it's just very close between Collins and Loeffler in terms of turnout and trying to see who's going to one-up one another.
Darren, I want to switch to this week's Georgia runoffs. Among the races, Fulton County District Attorney. Darren, polls show that Paul Howard may be in trouble from his challenger, Fani Willis. What's your take on this race?
I wasn't necessarily shocked about the poll numbers, Lori. We got to remind our viewers that Fani Willis was the top vote getter in the primary election, and Paul Howard was second. So I wasn't necessarily concerned about that being the case, but what is definitely concerning for DA Howard is just the timing of some of these recent things that have come out. He's being fined, with days left to go to the election. While he's definitely picking up some momentum on his campaign, he's got a lot of people that have endorsed him. Fani Willis has been able to go back up on television. I know Paul Howard has a TV ad as well, and she's been able to consolidate her vote. And so while I know he's trying to really stay on the offense, it's just been a lot of things that have been coming up in this race that has been very unfortunate. So at the end of the day, we know it's going to be a low turnout. There is still some power of the incumbency, but ultimately, if the polls are true and where they are right now as far as the electorate, that's not a good sign for the Howard campaign.
Kathy, Howard was fined, as Theron had mentioned, by the Georgia Ethics Commission for failing to disclose a nonprofit job where he collected close to $200,000. The timing really couldn't be worse for him, could it?
It couldn't. He's had a summer of bad headlines through this. I think the fact that the polling shows a 17-point spread and that Fani Willis is about 3 points, away from the majority, I don't see how he wins on Tuesday. I don't think that there are enough people who want to see him stay to overcome that kind of distance. You got to see a little momentum and passion, and I don't see it there. I'm glad that this got resolved. I'm sorry for any candidate to have these kinds of things come up in the course of an election, but I think it is important for voters to have seen what the resolution of this is so they could take that into consideration as they go to vote versus wondering what the outcome would be as they cast their votes.
Phil, I want to bring up an issue that you had mentioned last week, and we didn't really get a chance to discuss it. Atlanta City Council member Antonio Brown was charged, federal charges, attempted to defraud several financial institutions. This came as a surprise to a lot of people.
It did, and he's the newest member of Atlanta City Council. He was considered a rising star when he took office, and this was a shocker. Now, a lot of this, all of it took place before he got on Atlanta City Council, and it had to do with fraud allegations with regard to, he claimed he had a stolen identity, and he was saying that he was taking out these loans, which he's accused of doing fraudulently. So obviously, this has really made the rising star fall. And I think it's funny that, in a way, that he was a big proponent of defunding the Atlanta Police Department. Now you know why. He didn't want law enforcement to be looking at him.
Theron, do you want to respond to Phil? And were you surprised by these accusations and allegations?
Well, I'm going to use a term that you guys haven't heard in a while from me, and that is, let's not rush to judgment here, Phil. While these allegations and these charges are very serious, he has not been convicted of anything. And I do want to echo that these are very, very serious charges. And so he has come out and said that he is not going to resign. I agree with Phil that he was a rising star in the council in Atlanta, has been very outspoken on a lot of progressive issues in the city of Atlanta, particularly not just defunding the police department, but he's really been out there with the peaceful protesting, trying to really highlight some of the things that are going on in our criminal justice system. But again, these are very, very serious charges. I don't want us to basically, convict him on this show. But I do think that he's going to have to figure out his future as a young man in this city, and also politically and professionally, how does he move forward?
All right, we'll be watching. Thanks, everybody. Coming up, Democrats sue the state of Georgia over long voting lines. We'll talk about that next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A federal lawsuit claims Georgia voters have waited in some of the longest lines in the country to cast ballots, and plaintiffs want the courts to intervene. Janelle, I'll start with you. Do you think this is a valid lawsuit? We saw some of those long lines right here in Metro Atlanta.
Actually, I have to be honest, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, and here's why. So a number of people said there need to be extreme precautions put in place in order to vote in person due to the coronavirus. And with the option of absentee voting, the option of early voting, the fact that election day is always the most busiest day of the election cycle, I think to anticipate a line period is definitely a part of the process. But to anticipate longer lines is definitely expected when you ask for different levels. I mean, think about it. There was all these different precautions in place, the social distancing and all of that, not to mention a new voting machine that had like an extra step to it. So I just feel like this is a little bit on the bogus side. I think it's a little spoiled, but that's just my personal opinion. If anything, I think what they should look at is the additional training for poll workers, like what we saw in Fulton County. There was a lot of poll workers who didn't feel like they were comfortable in the machine. I think that may be more important at this point.
Kathy, what about an additional push for absentee voting?
Well, I personally think that the Secretary of State should be sending absentee ballot requests to every voter like he did in the primary. We're going to go into the fall. It's going to be flu season. We don't have a vaccine. Kids are returning to school. Georgia has got dreadful transmission rates going on right now, and that's only going to get worse. I don't see us doing anything that's going to reverse that. So, I thought that was a good move that he made back in the primary. I'm sorry that they're not taking that step now, but I think that would do a lot to alleviate the lines and the pressure. And unfortunately, Georgia is going to be facing a lot of lawsuits and a lot of bad press unless we get it together.
I want to move on to a newly released report from the Office of Congressional Ethics. It shows Congressman Sanford Bishop was using some campaign funds for personal expenses. Now, Congressman Bishop said as he gathered information for investigators, well, it became evident that things were done improperly, and he promised full cooperation. Phil, I think this one too came as a surprise to many who know the congressman.
Yes, it's a shocker. Congressman Bishop has been around since the 90s serving, and these are thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money and campaigns that went for golf outings and so-called Christmas parties and travel to exotic areas. There was no excuse for this, and it seemed like an open and shut case, and he's obviously has to be embarrassed and has to reimburse all of these things.
Theron, weigh in here.
Yeah, Congressman Sanford Bishop has been a very honorable member of our Georgia delegation. I think you pointed out something, Lori, that once he was made aware of these charges, number one, for our viewers, he's paid everything that he could possibly pay back. He has done that. And then two, I think, Phil knows this, is that we know that there's always sort of this ongoing process to make sure that members of Congress don't violate these rules. It's not unheard of for a member of Congress, he or she, to be under investigation for charges that are being made on the campaign and also in the congressional office. And so, again, I'm going to use this term. Let's not rush to judgment here. I think that the congressman has served his district honorably for a very long time, and I think that he'll get through this. And ultimately, this will be a lesson learned not only for him, but for other members of our Georgia delegation.
And just to remind everybody, he's not been charged with anything. Real quickly, Theron, I know
Correct.
you were pleased to hear there will be a special election to fill the vacancy left after the death of Congressman John Lewis. But this person may only serve for a few weeks, and there has been a lot of confusion on this issue. So clear this up for everyone.
Yeah, just to be very clear, I mean, you got to give Governor Brian Kemp some credit here for doing his job as governor. It was under the law that he had to set a special election for the unexpired term of Congressman John Lewis. And so what he was able to do is set the election on September 29th. And so I encourage everyone who live in the 5th District to get to know the candidates who are running and make sure you vote on September 29th. But with the amount of people that are in the race, it's highly likely that it could possibly go to a runoff. And so that runoff date would be on December 1st. So that December 1st date is so important because had it been on the November ballot, then the runoff would have been null and void because it would have happened after the new congressperson from the 5th District would be, quote unquote, sworn in. And so ultimately, just to really explain it as simple as possible, just let people know that there will be an election on September 29th to the unexpired term of Congressman John Lewis.
We'll have a flow chart for voters, I guess. Thanks, Theron. Well, coming up, winners and losers, everyone. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Not a lot of time in this block. Janelle, we'll start with you.
Okay, absolutely. So my winner is Ivanka Trump and the Trump administration's Justice Department announcing a $35 million grant to 73 organizations to provide, and I quote Ivanka on this one, safe and stable housing for human trafficker survivors in 34 states. And my loser, coming at no surprise, is Joe Biden. He's definitely my loser. He made a statement this past week that African Americans are not as diverse as Latinos. Once again, he has no clue what he's talking about, so he is my loser for continuing to insult the black community.
Kathy, over to you, and you have to talk as fast as Janelle.
All right. City of Smyrna became the 10th city to pass a comprehensive non-discrimination ordinance this week. And not only did they do a great job in doing that, but the public hearing was really something to behold. They had social distancing, people participating on Zoom, and then responded to the feedback. So hats off to them.
All right, Phil, over to you. We got about 1:30 in the show.
Okay, just one winner, Warren Fortson. He passed away at age 91. He was a very prominent civil rights and education attorney. He used to be general counsel for the Atlanta Public Schools, and he had a great record. He was practicing law right up until a few years ago.
Awesome. Theron, over to you. We have about a minute.
Okay, I want everyone to go out and vote this Tuesday if you have a runoff election, particularly the people in Fulton County and the metro areas. And then my second winner is going to be Synovus Bank Chairman and CEO Kessel Stelling, United Negro College Fund. They, this week, named a $1 million donation under the name of State Representative Calvin Smyrie to ensure that students go to HBCUs and other universities across the country, particularly in the 5-state footprint of Synovus Bank. So definitely want to make them my winner this week.
Awesome. Thank you for keeping those short. I appreciate it. That's big news. And my winner is Frank Fernandez, who will take over for the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. Congratulations to Alicia Phillips, who had that position for 43 years and just did an amazing job. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in, and we will see you again next week. And don't forget to head to the polls for the runoff on Tuesday.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.